It's Friday, baby. That can only mean one thing. It is the Craic. Welcome, Crackheads. How are you? It is another edition of your favorite show. I, of course, am Petesy Carroll. Yo, it's a decent enough weekend for combat sports. You got the PFL, the tourney tonight. Thad John. A lot of big things happen. Nathan Kelly from Ireland also on the card. Very, very interesting. We have promised you guys that we will give you some kind of insight on the Ali Revival Act. This, of course, being an amendment to the Ali Act, something that protects the right of fighters from exploitation. TKO Boxing are looking to turn over a new leaf with the Ali Revival Act, and we will have John S. Nash, my North Star in terms of all combat sports litigation, on to speak about this. He does great things, great things over on Hey Not the Face Substack. I've been following it diligently. He has been covering this story comprehensively, and we cannot wait to talk to him. We will also be talking about the Conor McGregor, his failed appeal, which went through yesterday in Dublin. We can talk all about that. We had a brief moment on the Boys in the Back yesterday to discuss that too. And we're going to talk about all this doomsday talk surrounding the heavyweight division. Suddenly everybody's talking about heavyweight as if it's flyweight, circa Henry Cejudo v TJ Dillashaw. We have the likes of Matt Brown on MMA Fighting saying the future of the division relies on an Aspinall victory. So we're going to talk all about that. And before we bring in my wonderful colleague and one of your favorites, the man in the hat, Chuck Mindenhall, I just want to say that I received the email this morning and I am contractually obliged to wish New York Rick Jackman a happy birthday. He is 42 today. He is a wonderful, wonderful man and a fantastic boss. We call him Mr. Birthday around here because he loves celebrating it so much. And I would urge all of the listeners to this show to go over to @NewYorkRick. That is @NEWYORK no K RIC, and wish him a happy birthday too. We love him so much. I know I've got some of the guys here in the back who also work under New York Rick's regime, also received the memo. So, Jordan, completely of your own volition, do you have any happy birthday messages for New York Rick?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not forced to say this at all, but happy
No
birthday
way.
to Rick. I'm so happy to work with you and for you. I hope you enjoyed the cookies that you've been begging for weeks. I know we joke about Frank wanting lasagna, but it was really you for 4 months asking for rainbow cookies. So happy birthday, man.
For this beautiful message. And we also have Mysterious Frank in Oscar Losef's absence today. Frank, would you like to wish New York Rick a happy birthday completely of your own volition once again?
Yes, let me read the script verbatim here. It says, Dearest Mr. Birthday, I wish you the happiest 42nd birthday. I personally am happy to be spinning around the sun with you all these times.
That is beautiful. I have tears in my eyes. Yeah. That is absolutely fantastic. Can we bring in my great friend, Mr. Chuck Mindenhall? Chuck Mindenhall, how are you, sir? I wanted to spare you from the New York Rick stuff, but by all means.
You should have done something in between just to get me out of this conversation. You know what I mean? Like a little segue. No, I was half expecting Frank's to be that Marilyn Monroe happy birthday, the Mr. President thing. I thought that's what he had scripted, so I was a little relieved there.
It is. It could have been the big reveal. Everybody's always. Every time I put up a picture with anyone, everyone's always like, "Is that Frank? Is this one Frank?" And I'm like, "Come on."
Is he really only 42 though? Because I was doing I could have sworn he said 79 was when he was born, but I don't. 42. He looks good for 42. I will give him that.
He
Kid's
looks
holding
fantastic.
Up. Yeah.
He looks fantastic. Chuck. I think it was last week we touched on the Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act. And we touched on it very briefly because we know that there are people in this world that cover this stuff far more comprehensively than us.
Far smarter than us is what you're trying to say.
Far smarter than us. And we have one of those with us today. It is John S. Nash, who is going to bail us out of having to know anything really about this because John is the authority on all things combat sports litigation. John, welcome back to the Craic, sir. How are you?
Well, I'm ready to smoke the crack here with you guys. So first, I just want to point out one thing. I think you guys plagiarized the Epstein letters for those birthday wishes. They sound like the letters to the book. But I'm also I also take umbrage with being called an expert. I am just an everyman that just takes a natural interest in this stuff and talks to people much smarter than myself. So, but I appreciate the kind words, and I'll try I mean, the one thing I am good at, I am very good at dumbing it down to people at my level to make sure they understand this stuff as well as I do.
Dumb it down pretty low here.
The level has been set low in the ground. Yes, I am ready. I'm more than ready for that. I'm aware of that. There,
PT says expert, and meaning next to us. You know what I mean? Next to us, you're an expert.
Yeah, well, that's like winning the it's like the old joke about winning the Special Olympics, which I'm.
Yeah, I mean, I guess let's kick it off with a quote, I believe, belonging to the great Luke Thomas, who has said it's a bespoke piece of legislation to satisfy the needs of one organization. One organization, in this case, being TKO Boxing, as we're calling it, the union between Saudi Arabia and Dana White, as it seems, and their efforts to get into boxing. Is that how you see this, John?
Oh, I mean, it looks like it was crafted by TKO. You could tell. It's just the legislation they're proposing, the changes, the way this unified boxing organization works. It's way too specific to the way the UFC operates, way too specific to that structure to not say that this wasn't designed specifically for TKO.
Well,
and I was gonna Dana White, obviously, like we cover the sport for so long, but it felt like, when they talk about Zuffa boxing, for years and years, he was wearing that shirt years ago, and it seemed like there was never this entry point until these things have come together. But would he have ever even gotten this game if there weren't such a, like, you know what I mean? Like, they ran to regulation back when Zuffa purchased the UFC. They did all the necessary steps. I feel like he doesn't get into boxing. He doesn't get into this boxing world unless something like this could happen, right? Like, he's not going to do this unless he can kind of steer it into their way of thinking.
Yeah, I mean, Dana White himself, I think, might have wanted to get into boxing just to do it because it's kind of like a lifelong dream. But TKO, Ariel, I mean, they made it explicit in earnings calls and interviews when they talked about that they wanted to amend the Ali Act and there's an opportunity to get in boxing with the Saudis. So I think they had no interest. In fact, there's it's a hearsay statement, but I was told once that Ariel once explained why he wasn't interested in boxing. And the problem with boxing was it was 70-30 for the boxers, and it needed to be 70-30 for them to get into boxing. Right. Now, that, who knows if that statement's 100% correct, but it sounds truthfulness, as they say. So there's a degree of truthfulness to it. So I think that's it, because this opportunity came up with the Saudis in partnering with them and being willing to take all the risk and throw tons of money in it, and that they have connections with Donald Trump and his control over the Republican Party and their other political. Let's not forget Ariel has immense power himself and immense influence and connections with his brother and stuff in politics. That the opportunity exists to change the Professional Boxing Safety Act, is which the Ali Act amended. Right. So they're going to go back to that and amend that. And by doing that, it'll allow a structure that allows them to operate the way they want to in boxing. And you could argue, it kind of, I think it makes it clear, like the UFC's argument always has been in like the antitrust case is we're just amazing promoters. We're just so much better than everybody else. Yeah. Well, if that's the case, you should be able to enter boxing as it is, because you will blow everybody else away with your amazing promotional ability. But instead, they're saying we want to change these things that in the Phil Davis v. Zuffa case filing, they argue is how the UFC gains monopoly power. They're like, we want to get rid of these things that prevent this in boxing because we're amazing promoters, or because those are the barriers that prevent you from monopolizing a sport.
Can I ask, well, I'm sorry, one more thing on this, man. Like, going back for context. Okay, so I feel like there's a specific audience who really pays attention to this because nobody wants to have the foresight, including media these days, doesn't want to have foresight as to what this could mean. But can you contextualize, like, why the Ali Act, going back to the Professional Boxing Act in '96, but like why these things were put into place to begin with? What was going on in the boxing world? You know what I'm saying? That prompted all of this, and how that, if you deconstruct it, how that kind of comes back into play now.
Yeah, I mean, it's important actually to go back to in the history, because the way the bill's interpreted is why you cannot have your own titles as a promoter. It doesn't say anything in the Ali Act that a promoter can't have their own titles, but it's implied. And if you look through the legislative history, if you look through the court histories, you see that, okay, it's very clear what this intent of this bill was. And so if a judge is going to look at it, they're going to look through that history and say, oh, yeah, it's clear. They meant for not to have control over the titles at all. I'm sorry, I got people here in the house. I'm taking care of my mom, so I'm being distracted every once in a while. But that's no big deal. So in 1996, they introduced the Professional Boxing Safety Act. This was supposed to tackle mostly the kind of the health problems. And one of the problems was there was fighters showing up who hadn't gone through their medicals, hadn't been examined, were using fake licenses. And so they wanted to do something to make sure that the fighters were checked and that they're the actual people were showing up to have cards and they were licensed for these events. And so that was passed. And then there was a realization that had started back in the 60s with the first congressional hearings about boxing, is that while this did something for boxing's health standards, the protection of their safety, it did nothing for economic protections because they've been abused by promoters. In the 50s, there was a case called the International Boxing Club of New York, a promotional company, versus the USA, it was United States, the IBC of New York case, which was an antitrust case where a promotion had monopolized the championships. And tell me if this behavior sounds familiar.
It already does.
Yeah, the promoters, they had signed long-term exclusive contracts with the champions in the weight classes, and then they signed the number top contenders, and they told any other boxer, if you want to fight for the championship or fight one of the other top contenders so that you can be a top contender for the championship, you have to sign a long-term exclusive contract with options that extended if you win the championship. And so that's how they monopolized the championship level of boxing. Move forward, there's an antitrust case. They broke up the International Boxing Club of New York, but they started seeing those problems pop up again when people like Don King specifically, because the Ali Act specifically targets him more than any other promoter, would use what's called coercive contracts. They would say, you want to fight the champion, my boxer, you want to be the champion, you have to give me options. You win the title, I get to be your promoter for X number of fights. And that way he wins no matter what. He still controls the championship. He has incredible influence and power and leverage over the fighters. And so that's what they specifically were trying to break up. They're trying to get rid of this concept of coercive contracts and the idea that the promoters could use the championship to coerce people to sign with them, as well as keeping secret the finances, having a firewall between manager and promoters. All these things are being abused against the boxers. Well, that's why the Ali Act was passed in 2000. The problem with the Ali Act, of course, was it did not have the teeth of any enforcement. It's enforced somewhat by private right of action. Boxers can take it to court, so it's been enforced somewhat. But the Ali Act itself has no teeth where the Attorney General of the states or the U.S. Attorney General will step in and enforce it. And so it has not been nearly as effective as they hope. But the one part that I'd say has been really effective, and you talk to people in the industry, I've talked to Lou DiBello about this. I've talked to Kurt Emhoff. I've talked to Stephen Espinoza, people from Top Rank PBC. They will all say the coercive contract provision, that part's been pretty much enforced in the United States, which prevents these people who have mandatories or top boxers being forced to sign with the promoter. And I guess the other part's been proven to be true is the separation between sanctioning organization and promoter, because lo and behold, the UFC is trying to get that changed because they don't think they can get past that hurdle as well.
Yeah, that's one of the key elements of this thing, right, John? Like this idea of a UBO. Universal Boxing Organization, I believe it means, which would make them not a promoter. I'm wondering, can you briefly explain or take as much time as you want, but what would this Revival Act allow that the current Ali Act does not allow?
Well, I'm not going to take as much time because we could be here all day on this, but the UBO, to make it simple, the UBO basically lets you operate like the UFC, which has been banned in boxing. And again, as I noted, it's been banned in boxing to operate that way because they found out when promoters do that, they end up with a monopoly. Well, again, you look at MMA and it's like, we got a monopoly because we've been doing the behavior that they say causes monopolies in boxing. So what a UBO does, it's a Unified Boxing Organization. It basically says, like, we're going to have a parallel system to the Ali Act. If a promoter, and they present it as choice, if boxers want to operate in a different system, they're free to sign with the UBO instead of operating with promoters that follow the Ali Act. And if you sign with the UBO, what that means is that UBO one can have its own titles and can have its own rank. It controls that. It can have, and because it controls that, it can dictate who fights for the title. And also it's exempted from the other Ali Act provisions. So it can start doing coercive contracts. In other words, where we said before, where Don King would say, you want to fight the champion? You want to fight Mike Tyson? You got to sign a long-term deal with me. Now with the UBO, if that came in, they'd say, you want to fight the champion, you're no longer are blocked. We no longer have a 1-year limit or no longer have no contractual options on mandatories. There are no mandatories. We own the title. You want to fight it for it, you have to sign with us. UBO is under the system too. Both boxers have to be signed to the UBO. So there's no co-promotion. There's also a long list of benefits that they have to provide the fighters, which sound good on paper. And I know a lot of boxing fans get kind of, look at this and say, that's great for boxers. We have extended medical coverage that covers boxers outside the fight night during their training. We have to have a training facility that they can go to that is training for free. We have to have extra medical staff there. And all that sounds good, but also note that's all the stuff the UFC already provides. And I think the intent of this, why it's bespoke legislation, as Luke Thomas says accurately, is because it's written that you have to do all the stuff that the UFC provides, which is very easy for TKO to provide their boxers, because adding this coverage, this healthcare coverage for fighters, they already have 700 UFC fighters under coverage. It's not going to be as expensive for them to get a new policy extension to more boxers because they have a massive policy in place. Another promoter who's working with much smaller margins might look and they go, that's a massive cost for us to spend tens of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars over our roster to cover this. Also, they have PIs already. Other promoters will have to go build PIs or some sort of physical training and training facility. So that's an additional cost. So basically, they're putting hurdles that make it very hard for anybody but the UFC to become a unified boxing organization. And so they're trying to make it that they would be probably the only or maybe one other unified boxing organization, or maybe two. So it'd be kind of like MMA, where there's these PFL and these other minor promotions. And so I think that's the intent of that bill, is that they're going to allow the UFC. They've written a bill that lets the UFC operating procedure to happen in boxing, but also puts up firewalls, barriers to entry for other boxing promoters to do the same thing the UFC is going to do. I shouldn't say UFC, TKO and Zuffa Boxing, but the UFC is the name we throw around it. All that the parent company, it's not as well known as the subsidiary.
It's hard to imagine Eddie Hearn becoming like a Scott Coker, isn't it?
Yeah,
like all of a sudden being relegated to a space like, okay, you're over here now.
Yeah. Well, I think the other thing missed too is with this system, there is potentially, I think, an inevitability of monopolization. Because let's imagine you have Turkey al-Sheikh's money, or I don't even know if Turkey will really be the money behind the Saudis, SILA, but the PIF fund that the Saudis have are going to throw a bunch of money like they did with Live Golf. Well, TKO and their boxing venture, they can go sign the top guys in the world, and they can pay them a fortune, which they're already doing with Crawford and Canelo. So they get the top guys. But if you want to fight the top guys, and that's how you get no one in combat sports, fighting the top guys, well, you would now have to sign with this UBO instead of just rising in the ranks and becoming a mandatory and having the opportunity to fight for the title because you earned it through meritocratic process, and they could not deny you that chance for the title, and they can't force you to sign a contract. Now you would have to sign with this UBO, and so you'd have the next wave of fighters signing with the UBO, and they would then fight, they would fight Canelo and them, but they would also be an organization that's allowed to use coercive contracts and say, well, if you want to fight Canelo, you have to give us multiple fight options, a long-term contract. Then the next generation comes in and looks around and go, well, most of the best fighters are over in this UBO. The network effects start kicking in. I got to go over there because that's where all the fan interest, that's where the top fighters are. And so they follow the same path. We saw that in the UFC.
Yep.
And they'll start paying the top guys. The first generation might make a lot of money, but just like the UFC used Contenders and Ultimate Fighter, where they build these guys up on crappy contracts that they were locked in the UFC for 9 fights in the Ultimate Fighter, they could do the same thing with their development leagues, where they develop the fighters, they rise them in the ranks and get them to fight these top guys. And eventually, through the aging process, they're going to take over and be known as the top fighters in the world because they're the only ones given an opportunity to fight the top guys in the world.
I remember when this first kind of surfaced, John, and there was this idea that here comes Turkey, like this is going to be so easy for him to do this. We've seen a bit, like Chuck just mentioned Eddie Hearn. I believe we have some quotes here from Eddie Hearn in terms of how he's already seeing this become a reality in boxing. Here's a quote here from Hearn. A lot of fighters who we've been trying to match, even as like the first TV fight of the night or even off TV, and the opponents are saying, no, we've signed with TKO. So I believe the model is going to be pretty much relatively unknown guys that will be trying to turn into stars. That's what Hearn told the Sports Business Journal. I'm just wondering, is there much pushback from boxing right now, or is it this seemingly open goal as people were discussing it when this was first announcent?
Well, we've seen some pushback the last few days. We've seen the promoters. Bob Arum's made a comment about it. He talked about it. Eddie Hearn, Oscar De La Hoya, Pat English wrote an open letter. And I think when they saw the bill itself and saw how specifically it was designed for TKO, I think that was eye-opening for a lot of them. Like, this is serious. There's a good chance this gets passed. This will give them a leg up over everybody. And that's when it became a serious threat. And so that's why you see them talking out. But the people you don't see making a big deal about it, and just like in MMA, where only a handful of a handful of fighters step forward and push back, is you don't see the boxers making much fuss about this. You don't see the media too. Some of the media is alarmed by this, but I think a lot of the media, and I don't want to pick on anybody, but I think a lot of the media is somewhat misinformed of what the Ali Act does and what the intent of this bill is. They look at the stuff like the disclosures, thinking that's the primary purpose of the Ali Act. They look at the standards, the minimum standards that this bill offers, and think that's great. But they don't realize that the antitrust history of the Ali Act. You got to remember, this bill, the boxing legislation started in the '60s in the antitrust committee coming out of that IBC case. So there was always an antitrust portion of the Ali Act. In fact, they specifically talk about using these coercive contracts and stuff to monopolize weight divisions when they were passing the Ali Act. So there was an anti-monopoly effort to the Ali Act that I think is missed by a lot of people in the boxing media. And so I think the promoters have woken up to this, but I don't know if the rest of the boxing industry has. And for the fans, again, it's like, maybe the fans should be alarmed, but most fans, I don't expect them to be that deep in the weeds, the most casual fans, to care that much one way or the other. So you can't expect them to be alarmed or not over this, but I could see the promoters definitely, I think their eyes have been opened.
I've heard some people say that, and even yourself, when I was listening to the Substack show with Steffi, you were kind of saying there is some positive elements of this. I've also heard other people say the positive elements are a Trojan horse to some degree to make people feel good about bringing this in, where it could actually, obviously bring bad things with it and be detrimental for boxing. Like, do you stand up? Like, do you still believe that there are some positive elements to this?
Well, I mean, I don't think a minimum standard for pay is that bad. I mean, it's not that high. It's not so high a pay per round. It's $150 minimum pay per round. So it's not so high that it'll kill off a regional boxing, but it's not so low. It's high enough that maybe it'll kill off bum fights. The idea of just getting anybody in a tough contest, throw them in there. That it bad. The $25,000 insurance medical coverage minimum. Okay, that's higher than most states have now, but I don't think it's a game breaker like what happened in New York when they raised it to $50,000 and put a lot of regional or club shows out of business. So those are all positives, and also that the judges and referees have to be sanctioned by the Athletic Commission. In fact, all these standards exist in New York, so it's like they took the New York boxing regulations and just applied them to the country. I think those are all good. But are they so good that they outweigh what I think is the negative? And the negative is you're kind of handing boxing over to one entity. What's interesting is we all knew the Ali Act didn't work in the beginning. In fact, the very year after the Ali Act was passed, they started holding congressional hearings. They had congressional reports. The General Accounting Office wrote up a report, all discussing all the points of the Ali Act that didn't work. And they listed them off, like the sanctioning organizations. We didn't have the ratings weren't made mandatory. The guidelines, we were just, these were just suggestions. The contract provisions were not enforced properly. All these things were listed as a problem in the Ali Act, and they proposed a bill that fixed it. And what's interesting is I don't see anybody go and say, hey, that bill that fixed all the problems of the Ali Act, but also didn't allow someone to monopolize the sport by getting rid of the provisions of the Ali Act that are specifically designed to prevent monopolization. Why don't we bring that thing pass it? The bill that John McCain introduced year after year. No one suggests that. In fact, it was opposed by the ABC because it took away their power. It was opposed by promoters at the time. It was lobbied against heavily by Zuffa for years. But I find it interesting that this new bill that specifically looks designed to help one entity is they're going to push through Congress, and no one's going back and saying, why don't we just pass the bill that actually fixes all the problems that we say we have with boxing? Because one thing this bill doesn't do is everybody knows the complaints of boxing are there's too many titles. The top guys don't get the right fights to be champion, and the rankings are all screwed up, and there's not enough co-promotion between the promoters. And that's the big problems. And guess what? This bill does the opposite of all of it. Introduces new titles. It has rankings that are not objective because they're limited to only people in the UBO. And it prevents co-promotion because only fighters that are signed to the UBO can fight each other.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. I guess, look, I've done this to you so many times when it came to the class action suit. It would not be one of these interviews if I didn't ask you, do you think this will get passed? Do you think this is going to become a thing?
Oh, yeah, I feel it's a good chance. I don't think they would have introduced it if they didn't think it could pass. They have Donald Trump in office, so the Republicans will be fully on board. They just need a handful of Democrats in the Senate to sign on. So I think it's a good chance it'll pass. I think the giveaway, too, is the original Ali Act. It had a provision that said when this gets signed into law, 2 years later it goes into effect. This is 30 days later. So wow. I think it's time that they're going to have it done and signed by the end of the year, let's say, so they can go into TV negotiations and go into TKO boxing next year with this already in place. I think that's the plan.
Last thing, John, I was just going to ask you, man, like, presuming it passes, we wait for this, right? Like this happens 10 years from now, boxers are looking back. They have a huge gripe as how we got here. What is that gripe?
Well, I think the gripe will be, again, that the pay structure will be similar to the UFC, that one promotion will have complete control, that they'll be dependent on them. They'll have very limited negotiating ability, and they'll have to negotiate exclusively with this one promotion who has all the money. Now, that's not to say, listen, boxing has problems, and they should fix boxing, just like UFC has a whole different set of problems than MMA. You know, it's flip side of the same coin. One side is so disorganized that they cannot put a product forward that's helping the sport and pushing fans away. The other side is it's organized the fact that only one entity controls everything and gets to keep all the money. So I think the complaint in 10 years from now will be similar to what we see with UFC fighters, that we'll look at it and say, well, TKO, maybe they've saved boxing, air quotes there. They've saved it. It's on more networks. It's back on network. It has revenue coming in. Maybe it's doing record numbers of revenue. But then you look at the split on that revenue and you're like, well, it's now instead of 30-70 for the boxers, it's 30-70 for the promotion. And that's, I would like to see the benefits. I'd like to see the sport grow, more revenue, all that stuff. But I would still like to keep the split going towards the people that are actually getting hit in the brain, taking brain damage on behalf of my entertainment. I would like to see them make as much money as possible and have as much control over their careers. So, and they're also, one thing too is not mentioned enough. This also could impact UFC fighters and MMA fighters, because the Davis case makes argument in that lawsuit against the UFC. They use the example of the Ali Act and the IBC of New York case, examples of like how this was banned in boxing and why it shouldn't be allowed in MMA and why this is how the UFC monopolized the sport. And the whole point of the Davis case, at least from my point of view, is that it's if they get to the point where that looks like it might go forward, well, the UFC will be so threatened by the injunctive relief in that they'll pick up the phone and say, we want to settle. Forget all the fighters that sign these arbitration agreements and class action waivers. We will settle, include them, and everybody will get paid off. Please just don't go to the court and get a 1-year maximum contract, because that destroys our business. So for fighters that are currently in the UFC that sign these class action waivers and they want to get a check like the previous guys in the league class did as kind of a pension fund, let's say, at the end of their career, that's an outcome they want to see happen. The problem is this bill puts in the law, federal law, that behavior is allowed. So it's harder to win the Davis case if the UFC can point to it and say, what are you talking about that this is bad behavior? That's in the law, federal law, that says this is behavior we're allowed to do. And we're just following what federal law says. And on top of that, if in the future we wanted to expand the Ali Act to cover MMA fighters to get more rights, guess what? Now the UFC is already a UBO, so they're exempt from the Ali Act because there's an exemption in there for UBOs.
No, I'm not going to be that. I'm not going to be that guy to say that Dana would look for a loophole, man. There's no way.
He's an honest broker, and he's always been one of the nicest guys in the sport. John S. Nash,
that's
you
great
are
stuff,
a
man.
genius, my friend. That is fantastic. Thank you for coming on and giving us all this wonderful education in terms of what's happening here. You can check him out on Hey Not the Face on Substack. They do brilliant work. He is comprehensively covering all of this litigation stuff that we find ourselves wading through the murk, trying to figure out what the hell's going on. He's my go-to guy. John, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for it. As long as you throw accolades my way and praise, I'm more than willing to come on. That's my number one.
That's our currency, John. That's our currency.
Low bar for me to hurdle there. So thank you guys. It was a pleasure. I'm gonna go check on my mom and make sure she's still alive. So
all right,
guys
I'd love to hear
all the best to her.
Thank you.
Well, there he is. I mean, that is a lot to take in. That bit at the end, in terms of like them sweeping this class action under the L table as well, if they get this through. He mentioned Eddie Hearn, and we did pull up some of his quotes there, but I also wanted to. I think we have one more, right, Jordan? Like one about like the impact this could have on UFC fighters. How can they pass those purses when they can pay the comparatively smaller purses they do in UFC? It will cause an internal war across the two sports. That is an interesting thing to contemplate, right? Like that some type of move in boxing could trigger this great awakening of the UFC fighters, which the media, which the fan base have been calling for so long.
It's been separate. It's been separate for years. Like, in fact, I've always kind of contended that UFC, MMA in general, had a inferiority complex, and I think that's just because you had 100-year history or beyond that with boxing. But they were two separate things, and they've been able to kind of run parallel without one peeking into the other, or with casual shrug off from one side to the other. It's only in our age of crossover, right? Like where you start to look at the purses. I think we've been doing this in media since, for a long time. You look at what a top pay looks like in boxing compared to MMA. It was not comparable because the boxers at the top of the game were making ridiculous amounts of money. But when they become sort of singular into an argument, or like they're under the same kind of umbrella, that's when the comparisons become more real within the fighters themselves. And the whole thing is fascinating. You listen to John, I'm like, in the end, if this thing passes and it all goes down, we're going to enter a very fascinating, time in combat sports, just in general. Like it's just gonna, who knows? Like we're making these predictions. We could go back to this, and there's things that we didn't even contemplate. You know what I mean? That become problems. I think it's going to be a fascinating time as we go forward here.
Yeah, I think the great fear is like obviously WWE is killing it. Obviously the UFC is killing it. Like they're two amazing entities. They're two brilliantly successful companies. That's why TKO is estimated worth of over 20 billion. But I guess the fear is this kind of across the board homogenization of combat sports in general, right? Like where it's just everything feels too routine. Everything feels like too generic, right? Like that is the fear.
Look at the general reaction to the homogeny of fighter trunks, these kits or whatever that they were wearing. And just this, I don't know how to explain it, but it lopped out in a way that was almost unforeseen. Something of the spirit and the passion or something of that sport, like something that was unique, individual, that kind of promoted characters, whatever. It took something away. And I've never really reconciled that. Like the only thing that we did, when Venom came aboard after the Reebok deal, we're like, well, they're a little better. But that's it. I mean, but the thing that got compromised, and I'm not saying that we need to see dude wipes all over shorts and things like that, but that was revenue for these fighters. And there was something of a personality tip when they came out, right? Like this was just what they were able to do. Remember the flags that they had unfurl and back, things like that. You don't want, when you use a word like homogeny, it always scares me. It always scares me. In combat sports, you get into it because it's distinctly individual. And when you try to make that into a uniform thing, it's never going to be a neat fit.
Imagine the Sex Pistols had uniforms, for Christ's sake. You know what I mean? Like this is
well, that's true though. That is true. Imagine that visual. Seriously, like imagine the spirit of the enterprise if all of a sudden these guys are like, we got to force to wear, our Sunday best here, or whatever it is. It's like that's not that is not how it has operated. That's not the spirit of the sport either, you know?
Yeah, it really isn't like that. Like it always is the easy kind of comparison is like punk rock and feeling like you're a part of something underground and then it becoming this massive business, like this billion, it's literally worth billions upon billions of dollars. Chuck, we could talk about this for a long time. And again, thank you, John S. Nash, so much. It is not the only legal story that was in our
We got to get a
world.
lot of degrees, man, to have this show on.
I know, man. It's McGregor has failed in his appeal bid against Nikita Hand, who of course successfully sued him in November. She claimed that she was sexually assaulted by McGregor in a Dublin hotel in December 2018. McGregor had promised to appeal this, and as we saw yesterday, the 3-judge panel in Dublin have dismissed all grounds for appeal. We also noted yesterday in the report that we put out that there is a perjury investigation that is stemming from this appeal. Initially, 2 of Nikita Hand's former neighbors, Samantha O'Reilly and Stephen Cummins, I believe their names are, they were to come forward with new evidence, which I guess from McGregor's side would hopefully lead to a retrial. However, on the first day of the Court of Appeal for this case, I think it was 4 weeks ago, McGregor's legal team withdrew their accounts. And from there, Nikita Hand's legal team said this should be investigated for perjury. The 3-judge panel in the Court of Appeal said they would direct it to the DPP, that is the Director of Public Prosecutions. So that is under investigation now. Today, more information came out from this case. Nikita Hand will pursue defamation litigation against this couple who had their story printed in like massive publications over here, Chuck. Like I'm talking, they gave this whole account of where from their house. Again, they were neighbors of Nikita's at the time. They could see her then partner. They claimed they could see her moving in a way that would suggest he was assaulting Nikita Hand. This was alleged to have happened on the same day that this incident with McGregor in the hotel had happened. So this was published in a lot of newspapers over here. So I said yesterday on the Boys in the Back that I expected some litigation to stem from that. We found out today that Nikita Hand will be doing that. She is also suing Conor McGregor for defamation. McGregor has taken to Twitter, as we used to say back in the day, Chuck.
You love that.
His longest X post of all time.
Is it still up, by the way? Like, or did he take this down?
It was up longer than I expected. I think it was still up today when we were starting the show. Irish publications have put out reports debunking everything that has been said inside there. I saw him retweeting Grok. Like Grok had said he was innocent at one point, and he's retweeting Grok saying, "There you go,
God, dude."
The AI bot has said." Obviously, it's a huge story over here. As I was saying yesterday, there's bulletins everywhere. McGregor obviously not. He is a persona non grata here, as I've told you many times on this show, and this certainly hasn't helped things.
He can't get out of his own way. You know what I'm saying? At this point, he cannot get out of his own way. You know, I was thinking about this. The part where he's being dinged, and I know reputationally he's getting hit, but we've seen him recover from this kind of thing. There's a portion of the public, a big portion of the fighting public, that doesn't really care. They'll separate the artist from the fighter, or they'll separate the human being from the fighter. They just want to know what's going on, when's his next fight, all this stuff. He's getting dinged in the pocketbook, but you're almost like, why don't you just let this go? Like, why, you know, the fact that he exacerbated, he deserves, in my mind, for becoming like a professional tantrum thrower, to and showing again and again that he can't be like even relied upon. I was reading some of the, you know, all the debunking within what he was saying within that tweet alone. You're like, dude, you're only hurting yourself if you just like look at what has happened in boxing. Like even Tank Davis right now, you know, he just goes about his business. You could go back, George Foreman a few years ago. The late George Foreman had some sexual assault things come up. You know, Mike Tyson being the prime example. And I'm not, all I'm saying is at some point, if you're just, you know, you have a public that wants to just move on from it. They don't want to think about this. You're the one bringing it back into light. And at this point, Nikita Hand, I'm like, take more. I mean, her life is what keeps getting dangled out here, right? Like, and I'm just, you see that, and I think that that's from our perspective and from any empathizing human being. You're just like, why are we dragging through this? At this point, he could quiet this down and move on, but he hasn't done that. And this latest tantrum, I don't know, does it rub you as wrong as it rubs me? Like to go on there and do this stuff? I mean, it's just to me, it's just such disgraceful behavior that actually actively works against him.
Oh, well, like I try my best because obviously, as I said, I'm not going to come on now that like John Nash is going to be like, well, I'm a legal expert. Every time something like this happens and there's
Yeah.
a development, I have some certain people involved in the legal professions here that I'll call and I'll try to understand this. And like, I used to get text messages off people, Chuck, ahead of McGregor fights. So many.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
I think you'd be sitting beside me on press row sometimes, and I'd show you my phone. And it would just be blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. Everyone in Ireland talking about this. The only thing that comes close to a McGregor fight now is an update on this legal thing. Everybody is kind of everybody's involved in it. Everybody certainly who's contacted me, and I know there are people who support Conor. You just have to go onto his X post there to see that. But certainly the people who are getting onto me are very one-sided in their view on this situation. As I said, been calling legal people like all the time, every time there's a development in this case. And as I said earlier, Nikita Hand is opening litigation against McGregor for defamation and the various things he has said, mostly on X, I'd imagine, honestly.
Yeah.
Like mostly on social
Oh,
media.
yeah.
And from the person I spoke to today told me like this is exactly what Nikita Hand's legal team like.
Right.
This is
Sure.
serving them an open goal. Like you keep on talking about this as much
Exactly
as you
right.
want, and this will work in her favor. So I don't know, man.
I take specific, and I mean this has always been the case with legal matters, like court cases of assault and things like that. But to kind of detail, look what happened afterwards. She's out partying, texting, whatever. That kind of approach always bothers me, because if you look down the list of human, anything, literature, anything that goes on, emotions, anything that being alive means, life is a very complex thing. Human beings are very complex. There's not a set. People grieve, people, you know what I mean? Like they treat trauma in different ways. There's such things as shock. There's these, to just dismiss it. Well, I was already at home and all this stuff, like, and use that like there's some kind of standard for how you should be acting.
Yes.
Post some traumatic event. There are people who can't help but to kind of giggle at funerals and things like that because they just don't, you don't know how your emotions are. It's not like they think it's funny. It's like there's just people who are complex. They deal with things, and there is such a thing as shock, and there are such a things as not being able to process, especially when you're intoxicated, that something very traumatic just happened to you. So anyway, that's where I feel like when she's talking, and she's talking about her life being dragged through these different, very ugly sectors that she can't seem to escape. This is what bothers me. And I'm like, for him to, it's like this has never occurred to Conor McGregor, what that might look like. It's like he's still bringing this up as if he doesn't understand there's a human complexity to that. That's crazy to me.
Yeah, and I do think that argument was made by her legal team during the High Court civil trial. I think they did bring in like a psychologist to come in and talk about this theory of the perfect victim. Like everybody wants someone to react in exact this way.
Right.
If something bad happens, this is how you should react. When really it's a gamut and it's a spectrum of reactions, and each person is going to react in very different ways. That was what the psychologist said in that case. I do believe we have some quotes from Nikita Hand. Is that correct, Jordan? This is she said after the court proceedings yesterday. This appeal has re-traumatized me over and over again, being forced to relive it. What happened has had a huge impact on me. To every survivor out there, I know I know how hard it is, but please don't be silenced. You deserve to be heard. You also deserve justice. Today I can finally move on and try to heal. So yes, that was what the Chuck was referencing there when he was speaking about what she said to the public. And obviously there's massive public sentiment behind Nikita Hand here in Ireland. She was praised by the Taoiseach, the leader of this country, the political leader of this country, the president of Ireland. There was even marches through the streets trying to get the DPP to reopen this case. So to say that there is a lot of public sentiment on the side of Hand would be putting it very lightly. We'll have to see how the defamation case plays out. I'm not too sure if we'll be getting, blow by blow accounts of what's happening in court for that instance. But same thing with the perjury investigation in terms of that couple being investigated. We aren't going to know about it unless there is charges filed against them. So If there are any developments, we will keep you posted. We are going to talk about mixed martial arts now, ladies and gentlemen. How about that? I mean,
I'm sure we'll revisit McGregor again on whatever the next.
Yeah, next week.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought it's funny, Chuck. The great Tom Aspinall has become the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, and there's this sentiment for over a year where it's like he's the guy, and suddenly they're like, okay, he's the guy, and everyone's like, is he the guy though? Like all of a sudden everyone's saying the heavyweight division, which we've said ourselves, is on life support. But Matt Brown took it one step further on his appearance on MMA Fighting's The Fighter v. The Writer with Damon Martin. He said the heavyweight division is on the line, Chuck. If Gan goes in and beats him, the heavyweight division loses a lot of respect. Tom has to show he is the heavyweight division. I've also seen our own Ben Folks, who is not with us today. Well, I forgot. In all the celebration talk of New York.
Let's try it again from the top, Petesy, from the top.
Yeah, let's restart. Let's cancel this one and go again. But Mr. Folks, I was listening to his appearance on his own co-main event podcast earlier this week, and him and Chad made a good point that were like, if Tom doesn't win, we look like assholes. Would you agree with that?
First of all, I think it's unexpected turn that we now take, our shit stirring measures from Matt Brown's perspective, like what he's like. I think that's like an interesting. That's what MMA Fighting has really brought him to the fore on this way. Yeah. But occasionally, he does strike these chords, and we were touching on this last week. And there is something. How would you frame it? Like, there's something it feels. Like if a team gets gutted, if you're watching an NBA team or an NFL team or something, and they get gutted, they lose their stars. They're rebuilding, right? Like, and you're kind of watching these guys who they've been around a long time. We know their ceilings, and they're not going to do much. And there's this feeling of we need a youth movement. They need to do this. That's kind of where it's at, right? If you look at the top 10 within the heavyweight division right now in UFC, nobody is under 30 years old. The closest you get is I think Spivak, who's 30. Everybody else is above that. Now, I'm not saying that that's necessarily bad. There's a tendency, I guess, for the heavyweight division to be on the older side.
That's right.
We've known this for a long time because I think you grow into a bigger body as you go on. But but that is something. And then you have the fact. So Cyril Gahn, what Ben had pointed out in his piece is exactly what keeps going through my mind. Well, let's say he goes in there and beats Tom Aspinall. It's like one of those things you're like, man, this is a bad look, because the two guys that the UFC couldn't get back in the octagon, one that they lost to another promotion in the end, and Francis Ngannou, and then John Jones, who is semi-retired, maybe coming back. They're not there, but they beat they beat Cyril Gahn. I mean, we've seen this happen, and so now you have Cyril Gahn, and it feels like you've got somebody kind of masquerading as a champion versus being an actual champion. And at the heavyweight division, that really glares, because I think there is a subconscious understanding that that's the baddest man on the planet. Now, if Tom Aspinall wins it, I still think that it's in a strange place, because if you go down that same top 10, he's beat a fair share of those guys within that top 10. Who has the biggest juice? You would have to almost point out a Jailton Almeida.
Yeah. If he can beat Volkov.
If he can beat Volkov. And I think that is probably the play, right? Do they fight on the same night? Is that how they've kind of aligned it? Yeah. Which is a smart play. I think that's probably the most viable name. And what's the other cat's name who was fighting Pavlovich out there in China? Costa, what's his name? Costa. Waldo. Yes. And
Acosta. Waldes.
Yes.
Acosta. Yes.
So he's out there too, as kind of a new blood, I guess, if you want to call it that. But generally speaking, where's you look at like heavyweight or bantamweight or welterweight, there's these monsters that are kind of in that 10-6 range, and you're like, watch out for that dude as soon as he gets his chance. Where is that guy in the heavyweight division?
Yeah. And it is Waldo Cortez Acosta. I fumbled that name.
Yeah.
I fumble that name every time.
I do too. I don't know why, dude.
I call him Waldez, I think, a lot. I stumble all over.
Where's Waldez?
Yeah, that's it. But it's interesting. Like, I saw someone got upset with us in the comments as usual.
Today?
Because a couple of weeks back we were talking about the division and what's happened to it. and they said you're blaming John Jones and the division being bad. I'm not blaming John Jones. I'm blaming the UFC for giving Jones so much
Sure.
rope. And people can say like, what does that have to do with the quality of the division? But the reality is, like, you're talking about the NBA, NFL, Premier League. Imagine taking the championship away. Imagine
Right.
being like, all of you guys fight,
That's a
or
great
all of you
point,
guys
too.
play games against each other. There's no championship, but
Right.
you just go and play. That's what we've been doing for over a year at heavyweight, and
They-
that's
you-
why the
You're
juice is
so
gone.
dead on. You're so dead on because it is the UFC's fumble. It really is, because we pointed this out, man, throughout 2024 when John Jones was basically essentially shelved and waiting on Miocic. Like, we were like, makes no sense. Dana White was constantly out there fortifying John Jones. Where was the buildup for Tom Aspinall? Like, should have been Tom Aspinall's big moment, where you're saying like this British heavyweight who has just dominated the ring, just completely destroyed everybody he's fought, including a great deal of these guys in the top 10, like six of them or something like that. We shouldn't be feeling this way. Like, once the dust clears with Jones steps aside. We shouldn't be feeling this way. You should be looking at Tom Aspinall like, doesn't matter, man. This guy's era is now. That's kind of how this should feel, but it doesn't, because what they did is they built up Jones, and they built up that fight that didn't happen yet, at least. And that's the other side of this, right? Like, say that Cyril Gane wins, and I do believe, like, when these guys are saying that that's probably the worst case scenario for what could happen. And it's you feel bad, because Cyril Gane's duty is to go out there and try to really devastate the heavyweight ranks in this way. But if he goes out there and he wins, and Jones says suddenly, like, yeah, man, I'm coming back, because all of a sudden Gane, that's light work. We can beat him. Let's do it at the White House. That whole thing.
Yeah.
That's not going to have the juiceage. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's not
Yeah.
even it either. It would feel like we're constantly sidestepping the most essential things that keep that division vital. It'd feel like you're just constantly sidestepping what is most vital, which we were talking about boxing earlier, was kind of the boxing thing that Dana tried to avoid, right? Like, that you get the fight, you want the fights you want, and yet you would never get that at heavyweight. And that would suck. And so I feel for Cyril Gane. It's nothing to do with him. He should go out there and try to win the fight. But those repercussions, that's going to be a tough look for the UFC and that heavyweight division.
Yeah, there is some kind of weird things happening as well at heavyweight. We saw Martin Buday just last week really overcome a stern test in Buchecha, a guy, happy birthday, New York Rick. New York Rick was very high on, like a master of jiu-jitsu. There's no doubt about it. One of the greatest heavyweight jiu-jitsu players of all time. There was a potential for this guy to come in and shake things up, have like a Damian Maia kind of impact on this division. Buday fucking had a great fight, made Buchecha look very bad, in my opinion. Like, knowing how good Buchecha is, he just didn't allow him to have the fight on his terms at all. Buday, 7-1 with the UFC, has been released from the UFC now. Here it is. Here's a tweet on Air Jordan's point for it. Yeah, it's true. Yesterday we got a call that at UFC is not resigning us for the moment. Well, it is what it is. At least I'm leaving with my head up. Thank you. Like, what I'm getting to really is, Chuck, we had that flyweight incident, right?
I know where you're going. Yeah.
And we had like the likes of Jose Torres, all these guys leaving out of nowhere and saying, look, they're shutting down this division. We had Matt Brown's comments already saying that the division is on the line in this Gane v Aspinall fight. Are we headed towards a world where we're asking Tom Aspinall at this press conference, like we asked Henry Cejudo, do you think you're fighting for the future of this division?
I don't think that that's been a conscious thing from the UFC. If it is, I'd be shocked, because in the past, we went through this last week. We were talking about the golden eras of heavyweight, and when there are guys of huge intrigue, it's a very big deal, right? Like, the Brock Lesnar's, Cain Velasquez, even like when he was a big deal when he was fighting. I think that it's kind of extreme. It's just the problem right now is it's almost like the light heavyweight division was when John Jones took over it, which there are a lot of the old circuit, and like I said, these guys, they're not that long into it, but they're all in their 30s, but they're fighting each other, they're beating each other, so you can go down the list, and it's not like there's some undefeated guy, which is rare to find in at heavyweight anyway, but you can go down that list and you're like, well, this guy lost to this guy, and this guy lost to this guy, and this guy lost to this guy, and then they fight again, and trying to get back to the top, and this guy then beats this guy, and it's just, I think that's what gives it. It doesn't feel like anybody's distinguishing themselves, and then you have some Russians and there's some Polish guys. You've got like guys who aren't going to be like translating personality wise into like stars. They're just not going to do that. It's just, it has that feel, but the flyweight thing was always a bizarre thing to me too. But I feel like if you're talking straight up, are there enough big bodies to fill out the division? That's probably the closest comparison to the 125. Because back in the day when they were shutting it down, there was only, maybe 20 some names. So even to have a top 15, you're like, all right, we're going to have to really do some work here to figure out 15. But like with this, which guy was it? There's a guy, it's Tai Tuivasa. Yeah. He's in the top 10, I think, at number 10 in the UFC's rankings. He's lost 5 fights in a row.
It's fucking crazy.
So, I mean, in that way, there's such a relative dearth of like viable top guys that it may naturally, I don't think the UFC is trying to do it, but it may naturally start to close itself down,
Yeah. You remember the flyweight situation? I can remember Neil Seary was retired 2 years and one day he just popped up in the rankings. Like he was number 12. And everyone's like,
when in doubt, Neil Seary.
What the fuck happened there?
Man.
There was lots, like I think that happened on numerous occasions. Like guys who were retired who had been out of the promotion for like a distance of time. They're like, suddenly you are the 9th ranked flyweight in the world. Congratulations, my friend.
So crazy, man.
Yeah.
And even right now, like they've got like Joshua Van, not to go off on a tangent, but I mean, you don't even have like Askarov or Muhammad Mahayev, like those guys that you're like, they should be at the top of that division too, are still not in the division. So, and so that, I guess that shares a similarity too, when you don't have Ngannou and you don't, right. I mean, Jones isn't obvious right now in the mix, but you take away the bigger, it's hard to find the joy in the division right now,
Yeah. Well, I think we all suspect that at least Jones will tweet some interest in returning in the not too distant future. He already has, sure.
My God.
But look, speaking about personality, speaking about potential stars, you spoke to a man who was fighting in the World Tournament final tonight for the PFL. He is fighting the gritty Logan Storley. Is that John? What do you think of this guy? Chuck, you got to chat with him. You were talking team sports. You even hit him with a Ben Askren quote about team sports at one stage. I saw it. I like it.
Yeah, you saw it. You did read it. This proves to me you read it. No. I always find this interesting for guys who, because there are a few, there aren't a ton. I feel like most fighters understand they're very individual. They want to fight early on. But there are other guys who kind of segue in from other sports. And he's one of them. I knew he talked to Ariel about this too. Like he grew up playing football. And so I just was interested in the juxtaposition, I guess, from being a part of like an 11-man, lineup where like if you screw up, well, your teammates either pick you up, or if they screw up, you lose on their watch. You know what I mean? Versus a fighter where it's like, if I lose, I entirely lost it. I'm accountable alone. It's going to be me looking in the mirror. Or if I win, it was because I did this, right? So I thought it would be interesting to ask him that. And it was like, I was speaking, I was pouring music out because he wanted to talk about this. It was something he'd thought a lot about. I just thought that was interesting, like where he's like, you're exactly right. Having control is why I love this. And he's still in that at 27. I think he's like 10-0, right? Like something like that. He's undefeated and he's going into this finals. He has a chance to make a big grip of cash. Like he's about to come out of it if he wins it. And I think he still sees himself through that like invincibility thing that I love. I love when guys are still not jaded. They still kind of feel like they can take over the world. Like this is the best time to talk to these guys. And they have a lot of good positive energy. So I think that when I talk to him, that's kind of how he came off. Like he's a kind of ray of sunshine. And I do think, I know Ariel was talking about this too. And it's kind of been a subject this week. I do think he's got that personality and he's got that kind of prowess. Like once he's in there to become kind of a face for the PFL, which they need desperately, organic stars that they're building. And he could definitely become that guy for them.
Yeah. And look, he has the hallmarks. Like one thing they need credit for PFL is they do manage to get guys and make them stars, and they haven't been names in other places like the likes of
Right.
Hughes, the likes of Dakota,
Yep.
and now we have Thad here. Like, did he like has he speaking to him made you so much more invested in this fight? Would you say tonight?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. See, that's also the key, right? Like to
That's a
become a
great
sort of
sign. Yeah.
infectious. Yeah, like it becomes like an infectious thing. I got to check out this dude's fight, especially because he's navigated himself very well
Yes.
to get here. Like, he's had to beat tough guys. And I think that, you know, Logan sort of like we know what he's going to do. Like, this is a guy who, like, he wants to just drown your buzz through like a grinding decision.
Oh
You know
man,
what I mean?
he is the ultimate spoiler. This dude is the ultimate spoiler.
So
like.
there's intrigue, like which thing wins out here. Does the guy get through like this guy who's going to try to like, ruin everything in the worst possible way, or does he get through? So I mean, it has intrigue on that level too.
Yeah. And you have Mavlid Kabalaev v Jesus Pinedo for the 45 title. It is John v Storley for the 170 title. There's also a UFC card. It's from the
That's
world
right.
famous Apex. Tatsuro Taira v Hyunsung Park. We heard Taira speaking to Ariel Helwani earlier this week. I spoke to Chris Duncan just yesterday. The Scot, he is riding. I'll tell you why I spoke to him, Chuck. You might quite enjoy this. He's a guy that kind of crept up a different way on the European scene. Like, we're so used to the European guys going to Cage Warriors. You become the Cage Warriors champion and you go to the UFC. Like, I mean, like Paddy Pimblett, Conor McGregor, Aspinall. The list is endless of people who have gone this way. This guy had 3 fights in Bellator, won every one of them. They didn't care about him like they cared about the James Gallaghers and the Fabian Edwards and all these guys. So he just walked straight into Dana White's Contender Series. He lost his first fight. It was against Slavic Laws. But then he got another crack after going back to the regional scene. Won that fight. But the real reason I want to talk to him, he's riding a 2-fight streak. Both wins via guillotine. When Dustin Poirier retired, Chris Duncan puts up a post and he says, "Thank you so much for all the training, Dustin Poirier, and thank you for correcting my guillotine grip."
Wow.
2 guillotines in a row. He is the underdog again against Rebecca. People call this guy Rebeasty, but he is fully telling me in this interview, like, Dustin Poirier showed me how to guillotine, lads.
Is that
And
right?
He's like, he said he was doing rounds with him for the Benoit Saint-Denis fight. And he said the main focus of their active rounds, like Mike Brown wanted Duncan to smother him, and he wanted Poirier to be getting up off the ground. And anyone who's seen Duncan fight, very strong guy, like crazy. He's a farm kid. Like, he grew up on a farm. He hits like a fucking hammer, and he's just very heavy on top. So he was tasked with keeping Dustin down. He said that Dustin was getting up off the ground and guillotining him. And Duncan thought he had this great guillotine. And Poirier just keeps guillotining him. And he's like, what the fuck is going on? Poirier teaches
That's
him
not
these.
like Poirier.
Yeah, I mean, he never hits them in actual fights. He said he was fucking him up with them. He went through all this grip stuff with him, like different positions to hit it in. And now he's like, I can fucking get this guy with a guillotine this weekend as well. So there's one thing to look out for, ladies and gentlemen. If you happen to be in Europe and you are awake at 5 a.m., stick on the Apex card and Steve Duncan can score another underdog win over Rebecca, who he is fighting. It's 2 weeks of Apex cards, man. It's fucking hard going.
I find it so funny that the guillotine is like so associated to Dustin Poirier, who he didn't land one, right?
He never won a fight by guillotine.
Or even WC. I don't think he ever had one. It's a funny association. I guess that's part of it, is just that, like, he loved to do it, but it wasn't actually his go-to move.
There's some kind of poetry in it, isn't it? Like, just sell out on this move. I've never hit in an actual fight. Like,
even on the last fight, man. Even on the last fight, it looks deep for just a second. You're like, oh my god, no way. Pop
and
pop
no.
up.
No, in fact, no way. It's amazing to me that everyone who trains with him is like, no, he's fucking great guillotine. Like, and you're like, what? How the fuck did that happen? You know what I mean? Jesus Christ. Yeah. Right, guys. We have given you as much information as we can. We have packed this episode with a fantastic knowledge. Thank you to John S. Nash. We believe. Now, I don't want to make any fucking promises because he's off chasing the coast at the moment. We hope he doesn't get caught up in any tsunami action. We're talking about Ben Folks. He may be back next week. He has made a subtle suggestion that he may be back. Is that okay to say, Chuck?
Oh my god. No, I mean, it's okay to say, but we know how he gallivants. He's been on a different coast every week. You know, it's like he's all over the place.
Just shirtless on Instagram, you know, swimming, like showing off his muscles. Is he on steroids?
He's riding.
I think so.
He definitely. I mean,
definitely. What type of fucking poet looks like this? You know what I mean? This is ridiculous. I still haven't gotten over. On air, Jordan, what did you tell me? After everyone telling me how strong and muscular and beautiful Ben was, you hit me with last week. Oh, and he was wearing a really cool t-shirt. That's the gamut of all compliments. Everybody had nothing but amazing things to say about Ben, folks.
I mean, he's way better than you. That's it.
Period.
I can't even deny it.
Frank had to love the Misfits font. Frank had to love that.
I loved it. In fact, it was the day that I was wearing my Steve Albini Raiders shirt.
Oh, wow.
So it was like him and I were bonding without even
nerding out.
Exactly.
Oh, I fucking hate that guy so much, but I love him as well. It's a cruel situation I'm in with Ben, folks. His dog did swim in the ocean though, which was the goal of the trip.
Carl likes the ocean.
Yeah. Congratulations to Carl. It's a big thing. It's a big thing to happen. So yeah. This is all we've got for this week. I'm not missing my super chats. Yeah, no, I nearly got it.
Oh, you're still a step late. You're still a step late.
Fuck.
Oh, they always beat you. They always beat you every time.
I thought of it like very last. Petesy and Chuck, the best looking duo in the game. That is.
Thank you.
It's Oscar Losef. It is our.
Look at that.
It's our producer, our beautiful producer, Oscar Losef, who's sending this in. Fantastic stuff.
He keeps this streak going for being right.
Is that annoying you more, Frank, that Oscar Losef was just thrown in a super chat while you were here?
Yeah, doing... like, well, what am I doing here? You know? Come on, Oscar. Show needs you.
Thank you so much, Oscar. Is that all we got, Jordan? Ah.
Thank you, Oscar.
Thank you, Oscar. We love you very much. That is all we have for you today on The Craic. I hope you enjoyed our ramblings along with the educated wisdom of John S. Nash. We will be back next week, possibly with Ben, folks. We love you all very much. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you very much.